Next, let's discuss importing and exporting content. So we've talked about how we can quickly and easily add new content to our dotCMS instance. But let's talk about how we can import and export content and how this is actually a little bit different than just bulk uploading content. If we look at our content search, we'll see that we have the option, of course, to add new content by clicking on the plus sign. But we can also choose to import content. If I click import content, when we click this, it opens a window that asks us exactly how to import the content. First, we need to choose a content type to import. When importing content, all the content imported must be of the same content type. So let's suggest we wanted to bring in a number of products to our site at one time. From the content type, I could click the dropdown and choose product. Now, once I select it, it automatically grabs the fields from the content type. We'll see our key fields populate here. But first, let's talk about the language to import, because you'll see United States English is selected. But I could click the dropdown and choose Spanish or a multilingual file. Of course, the languages we see here are dependent upon the languages we have on our site. If we wanted to use a multilingual file, meaning we're bringing in this product under multiple different languages at the same time, we would need to make sure that we have the languages set up appropriately in that file. In this case, we're just going to take a look at English. Next, we see the key fields. Here, it's essentially asking for how to identify each one of these products. A key is important to understanding how data is managed and will uniquely identify each one of our products. Now, normally, we would want to have an identifier field, meaning each one of these products would have some sort of unique identifier, sort of like a serial number. But if we don't have an identifier, we can use key fields. We can choose one of these fields, or we can actually choose multiples. So if we wanted to uniquely identify our products using a combination of the title and category, we can do so. This might be necessary if we could have products with the same title, but under different categories. This way, it would essentially combine these fields to look for something that is unique in both title and category. If we scroll further, we'll see a workflow action. We can click the drop-down here, and just like when we uploaded multiple files, we'll see an option to choose one of these actions when we do import the content. We can save it, publish it, or delete it. And of course, these workflow actions are based on the content type and what workflow it's using. What we see here is also determined by the permissions that we have on our user account. Once we've set all of this appropriately, we simply choose the CSV file we would like to import. We would click Choose File and select the file to upload. However, it's pretty difficult to start this from scratch. So there's two ways to start one. For starters, you could click here to download a CSV sample file. We click this link, it will go ahead and download our template. We can click it to open it and view it here in Excel. Right away, our template actually includes headers for all of the fields specific to this content type, which is very helpful. But if we have an identifier, well, it's not listed here. Now, this works just fine for adding in new content. But what if I wanted to look at and modify existing content on my site using a CSV file? This can be extremely helpful for making simple changes in the fields all at once. Let's take a look at the best way to do that. We'll close our template. I'm not going to save it. And we'll go and search for the content that we're looking for. Go to our content search and choose the content type from the dropdown. In this case, let's look at products. Here we can see all of the products within this content type. Now I could click the plus sign and we can choose export. Clicking Export will go ahead and export all of our products within a CSV, just as we saw our template, but with each of the products that exists on our site populating. So let's open this up. We can see that Excel might perform some data conversions if necessary. Something like converting large numbers into notation and removing leading zeros. If we want to, we can keep these. In my case, I'll choose Don't Convert. It's best to maximize this window and, of course, stretch out any of the columns as we need to make sure that we can see everything appropriately. Now we can see all of the data within each of the fields for every product. Here, we actually get an identifier column. Each one of these products has a unique identifier, and by exporting, we will always get an identifier column. This can be really helpful, again, for updating content that already exists on the site. If, for instance, I wanted to come in and modify our specifications for our products, and I needed to do so in bulk, I could export our products into a CSV, come here and modify the individual products that need to be modified, and then save my changes and re-import this data. Once we've made the changes and saved it, we would simply choose to import the content and select that exact CSV file, and it will make the changes that we need to. As long as that identifier field already exists within our site, it will go ahead and modify that content. If that identifier doesn't exist, it will attempt to locate those key fields instead that here in the content import. Let's go ahead and add in some new content. What we'll do is actually copy a row from above, and I wouldn't recommend doing this in the real world, but we're using it just as an example. We'll paste it in, and I will actually delete the identifier field. In fact, this time we'll only make very small changes. In fact, this time that's all we'll change. We'll leave everything else as is, and note that the rest of these fields are identical to the row above. Now I'll simply save this file, minimize it, and now we'll choose our key fields. If, for instance, I choose my URL title as a key field, then I'll choose my workflow action to save, and then my CSV file to import, I'll choose the file that we just created. And I'll click Open, and then I'll go to Preview. Let's see what it's like to add new content using import. I'm simply going to copy one of these lines. Then I'll remove everything else and paste in our content. Then I'll remove the identifier, and I'm actually going to leave everything else. I want to see if it recognizes the fact that this content already exists if we use key fields. So once I've made these changes, I'll click Save. I'll go back to my window. I'll choose my appropriate key fields, like say title, choose an action, like save, and choose the file. Then I'll click Go to Preview. Now, as soon as I choose to view the preview, it will let me know what conflicts we may have. In the summary, we can see that it did automatically find the identifier field. We see 13 headers that match these and will be imported, and 2 lines of data were read. Although I only had my single line, it's possible that I left some content in one of the other fields. It then gives me some warnings, things like header language code doesn't match any content type field. This column of data will be ignored. Same for country code. The content type field product number is unique. It lets me know that this is a unique field. Then it gives me any errors. Line number 2 contains errors. The URL is malformed, and one input line had errors. I could choose to go ahead and import the content anyway, or click Cancel and find whatever issues I may have. I'll click Cancel for now, but it's important to note that it does let you know what warnings and errors you may have before moving forward. Make sure that you resolve anything that you deem necessary before actually importing the content. So, now we know that it can be very helpful to both export content and import content, making changes where we need to, and easily adding content in bulk or modifying content in bulk to dotCMS. One final thing to note is that if you are attempting to import any content that has images within them, such as say a thumbnail or an image like we had in our blog, then that image first needs to exist within the site browser. We would need to upload that image to the site browser and ensure that it exists there. Then we would use the path to that image within our import as its own field. So hopefully it's clear that importing and exporting in bulk can be very, very helpful. We can import content in large quantities, and we can export our content to a CSV so that we could easily modify those fields and then re-import it if necessary. We can also export a CSV of our content types so that we can use it as a template for building onto.